The first day of my vacation finally arrived. I went to bed later than usual, enjoying the peaceful silence in the apartment. My wife Elena had already gone to work, my son Leshka to school, and my mother-in-law to her dacha. It had been several years since I had been able to take a vacation, and I had hoped to spend it with my family. Unfortunately, because of my official duties, I could only take a vacation in the fall. As I prepared breakfast, I couldn't escape the feeling of disappointment that I would be spending the vacation alone. However, I didn't let it dampen my mood. I made plans for the day, anticipating a leisurely and relaxing day with no rush. Helen, my wife, had to be home by 6:30 p.m. as her work ended at 5:00 p.m. I decided to prepare dinner by that time and gather the whole family around the table, something we hadn't been able to do in a long time. By the time dinner was ready, my son and mother-in-law had returned home, but my wife was still gone. I called out to my son, asking if he knew when his mother would be home, but he didn't know. He suggested I asked my mother-in-law or called my wife, but neither option worked. After worrying a bit, I served dinner to my son, mother-in-law, and even the cat, and waited for my wife to come home. It wasn't until 11 p.m. that I heard the front door open with a quiet click. Helen entered the bedroom and was surprised to see that I was still awake. I ignored her question and turned on the light, wanting to know where she was and why she hadn't returned my calls. She was taken aback by my sudden assertiveness and hesitated before answering. She had a meeting at work that had gone longer than expected, and her phone was on silent mode. She apologized for forgetting about my vacation and phone calls. As we sat together, I shared my plans for the rest of my vacation, and she listened intently. After finishing her tea, she came over to me and hugged me tightly, and I felt the tension and anxiety dissipate. "I missed you so much," she said, and I realized that everything was going to be okay. Earlier in the week, I made the decision to visit my hometown and spend some time with my parents, meet up with old friends, and go fishing with my dad. I had planned to stay for a few days and wanted to bring my son along, but he declined, citing a busy schedule. Oh, the difficulties of dealing with a teenager. I started preparing for the trip, and first on my list was to find my hiking backpack. To my dismay, it was nowhere to be found in my closet. I wondered if it had been thrown away or lost. Hoping for the latter, I searched all the closets and finally found it on the bottom shelf of the dresser. As I was pulling out all the stuff, my attention was caught by a lilac box hidden among the bags and boxes. I recognized the logo and was curious to see what was inside. To my surprise, it was a pair of expensive bright red stiletto-heeled shoes made of soft leather. Whose shoes could these have been? If Helen had bought them, why hide them here? But she never wore heels like that and wouldn't buy expensive shoes for nothing. After 10 minutes of thinking about it, the thought occurred to me that it might be a gift. But who gives shoes as a gift? Girlfriends? Colleagues? Or maybe it's a man. I brushed the thought aside and decided to ask Helen about it later. I continued packing and eventually forgot about the shoes. As I gathered the essentials for the trip and the fishing trip, I suddenly remembered the bunch of keys I always take with me. I couldn't remember where I had put them, and I had last seen them 2 years ago. Although there was no need for them, having them in my pocket when visiting my parents' house always made me feel nostalgic. I searched for the keys for a long time, but they seemed to have disappeared. As a last resort, I checked the locker where Helen kept all sorts of little things we didn't need, but didn't want to throw away. And there they were, my long-lost keys. I smiled, remembering why I'd put them there in the first place, and continued packing. Among the sea of items, I came across my keys. As I pulled them out, I came across several scraps of paper. One in particular caught my eye, a purple piece of paper torn from a notebook. Without thinking, I read the words scrawled on it. "This is my number. Be sure to call me. I'll be waiting. Arthur." Questions instantly arose in my mind. Who was the note meant for, and how did it end up in my possession? Even though I reread it several times, I couldn't remember anyone named Arthur. Even my wife had never mentioned a man by that name. As I pondered these thoughts, the phone suddenly rang, distracting me from the note. Soon it was completely out of my mind. Toward evening, I went to the local supermarket for groceries and fishing supplies. As I entered the supermarket, someone tugged on my sleeve, causing me to stop. As I turned around, I saw Susan, a friend of my wife's whom I had seen glimpses of but never spoken to. She had amazing looks, long blonde hair, and a beautiful smile, but something about her repulsed me. "Hi, Douglas," she exclaimed. "Why are you alone and looking so glum?" "Hello, Susan," I replied, glancing at my watch. "I'm sorry, but I'm in a bit of a hurry." But she didn't seem to hear me. "Well, tell me how you are doing," she continued, not taking no refusal. "Let's sit down somewhere and have a chat. What do you say?" "I appreciate your offer, but I really have to go," I said, trying to politely decline. "Maybe we can meet another time." But Susan continued to insist, intertwining her hand with mine and getting uncomfortably close. I sighed, feeling the frustration building up inside me. This woman and her insistence was definitely not my type. Without further hesitation, I gently released myself from her grip and apologized for my abruptness. I explained that I was in a hurry and didn't want to create awkwardness. Susan, already calmed down, blocked my path and asked a question. "What's wrong? Don't you like me?" She held her gaze on me, waiting for an answer. Why was she suddenly asking such questions? "Susan, please hear me out," I began in a conciliatory tone. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested. And I really need to hurry. Helen will be home from work soon." "Oh, how nice." Susan cut me short with a smile. "He's in a hurry to see his dear Helen. But let me ask you, is she really worthy of your devotion?" She took a step back and studied me with a sly look. "What do you mean?" I asked, hardly recognizing my own voice. Susan watched me silently with a mischievous gleam in her eyes. I crossed my arms and waited for an explanation. After several minutes of silence, Susan finally looked away and muttered, "Never mind, I shouldn't have said anything." I turned and walked to the supermarket, relieved to be away from her. The encounter left me feeling uneasy and nasty. That evening, my wife stayed late at work again. I fell asleep before she got home, and when I woke up in the morning, she had already left for work. On the kitchen table was a note from her wishing me a happy journey. I said goodbye to my son and mother-in-law and left for my hometown. Everything seemed to be normal, but something was weighing on my heart and mind, causing great discomfort. In the evening, I sent a message to Helen to let her know that I had arrived safely, but she never replied. To distract myself, I decided to go fishing. The following morning, I phoned my son. "Hey Fred, how's it going?" "Oh, hi Dad," I heard my son's disinterested voice. "Tell me, everything all right?" "What could have happened in just one day?" he replied, sounding almost offended. "Never mind that, just tell me, how's your mom doing?" I paused as I waited for a response, but there was only silence on the other end. I could sense Fred struggling to find the right words. "Well," I prompted, "is something wrong?" "No," his mom finally responded. "She's out of town for a few days on a work trip to New York." "What? She never mentioned a business trip," I exclaimed. "Don't take it out on me, Dad. Ask her. I've got to go to practice now, so I'll talk to you later." Without waiting for a response, my son abruptly hung up. I stared at the phone in confusion as 1,000 thoughts swirled in my mind, jostling for attention. My head was throbbing, and I decided to take a walk in the nearby autumn forest. The crisp air, the peaceful silence, and the earthy smells of the forest helped to calm my nerves and clear my thoughts. But I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been gnawing at me since I found a pair of expensive women's shoes in our closet 6 days ago, along with a strange note and Susan's cryptic hints. Why hadn't I asked Helen about it? What was going on in her life that I was completely oblivious to? How long had this been happening? What was I supposed to do now? I didn't want to open my eyes and face the possibility that my wife had drifted away from me and become a stranger. Lost in thought, I stayed in the forest until evening, when the sky began to darken. Eventually, I made my way back home to my parents' house. In a couple of days, I would return to the city, and my wife would be waiting for me at home, and our life would continue as usual. But I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of my mind. I was content with my eyes closed, but deep down, I knew something was not right.